General Hospital spoilers reveal that the relationship between Lucas and Marco is gradually becoming a dangerous storm, pulling Lucas into a spiral he never imagined. At first, everything seemed like a sweet coincidence, a fresh start, a magnetic encounter with an intriguing but mysterious man. Marco appeared as the stabilizing force that Lucas had longed for after all the pain from his past. But as time went on, warning signs began to appear, signaling that things were not as simple as Lucas had thought. Marco claimed to be a lawyer, working with major contracts and powerful clients. His business cards, his confidence in every word, and his dignified demeanor all made Lucas believe he had finally found someone with no ties to the criminal world like Brad. But Lucas was wrong. And his mistake could cost him dearly. Things started to get strange when Lucas realized Marco seemed to have too many connections in the shadows. Midnight phone calls, mysterious meetings Marco never explained, and times when he disappeared without a reasonable explanation. Though Lucas was suspicious, he still tried to trust him. He was so tired of the troubles and lies from his past, and he wanted a fresh start. But then, a horrifying truth began to surface. One evening, while Marco was rushing out, Lucas accidentally found a stack of documents in his belongings. Names, contracts, financial information, all connected to a name Lucas had heard before, Jen Sidwell. When he saw Marco's signature on some important papers, Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He knew he was touching something dangerous, a truth that could change everything. But the real shock came when Isaiah Gannon overheard Lucas mention Marco and JS and Associates. Immediately, Isaiah became extremely concerned. He pulled Lucas aside and warned him that JS was not an ordinary law firm, and Marco was not just a lawyer. It was Isaiah who revealed that Marco was actually Sidwell's son. A notorious criminal involved in many dangerous dealings, including the capture of Lucky Spencer in Somalia. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. Had he been spending time with a man directly involved in a criminal organization? Had he allowed himself to get involved with someone who could be the right-hand man of someone as dangerous as Sidwell? The pieces of the puzzle started to come together, and the picture Lucas saw was far from the beautiful one he had imagined. But the problem wasn't just that Marco was Sidwell's son. What was truly worrying was that Sidwell himself had moved to Port Charles, and Marco's presence was no coincidence. He was expanding his influence, and Marco might be carrying out a mission for his father. If that was true, Lucas was caught in a dangerous game he never even realized. Things quickly got worse when Lucas discovered that he was being watched. Strange men started showing up around his area, mysterious eyes following him every time he stepped outside. It seemed someone was making sure Lucas wouldn't speak about what he'd uncovered. Cornered, Lucas knew he had to make a decision. He could cut ties with Marco and try to stay away from all the trouble. But would that truly help him escape danger? If Sidwell knew that Lucas was suspicious, would he let him walk away easily? Or would Lucas be dragged deeper into this game, becoming a pawn in a plan he didn't even understand? What had once been a beautiful relationship between Lucas and Marco, a beacon of hope for a fresh start, was now turning into a trap Lucas didn't know how to escape from. If he didn't act fast, he could lose more than just a relationship. He could lose his freedom, even his life. Lucas's story is heading toward a dramatic turning point. All the truths are being exposed, and when the final pieces fall into place, no one can predict what will happen next. One thing is certain, Lucas can no longer run from the truth. He must face it before it's too late. Marco is Sidwell's son, and this truth not only completely changes the game but also places Lucas in a dangerously unpredictable situation. At first, Lucas thought he had found a promising new relationship, a clean start after the pain he had endured. But now, everything was slowly turning in a direction he never imagined, and not for the better. The fact that Marco is directly connected to one of the most dangerous men in Port Charles is not only a shock but also a real threat to Lucas. If Marco were simply a lawyer representing underground organizations, Lucas might still have a chance to distance himself. But if Marco is truly a part of the criminal organization led by Sidwell, that means anyone involved with him could become a target, and Lucas is right in the middle of it. Just as Lucas started realizing that something was off, everything quickly became even crazier. Mysterious men began showing up near his home, strange eyes following him every time he left the house. Silent phone calls, strange messages, and secret meetings Marco seemed reluctant to explain. These were all warning signs that Lucas may have ventured too deep into a world he should have never touched. But the problem didn't stop there. Lucas began to realize that Marco wasn't just a simple lover, he might be a man trapped in Sidwell's web of power. This meant that if Lucas tried to distance himself from Marco, he wouldn't necessarily be free. If Sidwell thought Lucas knew too much, would he let him go easily? More and more of Marco's secrets began to unfold. Lucas discovered that Marco wasn't just Sidwell's son, he was carrying out some kind of mission for his father in Port Charles. The law office he opened was merely a front for the shady dealings going on behind the scenes. The contracts Marco was signing were illegal, and the clients he was dealing with were not ordinary businessmen. Marco was playing a major role in Sidwell's network, and Lucas, whether he wanted to or not, was being dragged into that game. Lucas felt trapped. He could no longer pretend that he didn't know the truth, but at the same time, he couldn't just turn his back on Marco so easily. Did Marco really love him, or was this relationship just part of a larger plan that Sidwell had orchestrated from the start? Could Lucas escape this web without paying a steep price? These questions flooded Lucas's mind as he realized that he no longer had control. Once he entered Marco's world, he couldn't simply walk away. And if Sidwell felt that Lucas was a threat, no one could guarantee that he wouldn't become the next target in this power game. This story is turning into an uncontrollable storm, and Lucas has only two choices: fight to escape or accept that he's trapped forever in a world he never thought he would belong to. An explosion is coming, and when it hits, no one can predict whether Lucas will be alive to tell the story. New information about Sidwell has thrust Lucas into a whirlwind he never thought he'd get caught in. A relationship that seemed simple and promising has now turned into a nightmare with no way out. Everything is happening too quickly, too dangerously, and Lucas finds himself powerless but to face the truth unfolding before him. When the truth about Sidwell is revealed, Lucas feels not only betrayed but also utterly ashamed. He had once believed he had escaped the troubled past tied to the criminal world, that he was no longer bound by the shadow of the Jerome family. But now, once again, he's been pulled into the middle of a force he never wanted to be involved with. Discovering that Marco is not only part of Sidwell's power game but also his son makes Lucas feel like his entire world is collapsing. Lucas tries to adjust his thoughts, attempting to find a way out of this situation. He knows that if he remains silent, he could become a pawn in Sidwell's plan. But standing up against them would mean facing one of the most dangerous men he's ever known. Every step he takes now could lead to unpredictable consequences, and Lucas realizes there's no turning back. The changes in Lucas's life are happening too quickly for him to control. If he once thought his relationship with Marco was a coincidence, now he knows that nothing is accidental. Everything is orchestrated, everything has a purpose, and Lucas is being pushed into a game he never wanted to play. But the question remains, is he strong enough to escape it? Lucas wants to find a way to rid himself of the tension surrounding him, to regain control of his life. But to do so, he must make a major decision, one that could change everything. Should he leave Port Charles, leave it all behind, and try to start fresh elsewhere? Or should he confront Marco, Sidwell, and find a way to overthrow the forces controlling his life? This is no longer just about love. It's a battle for freedom, for Lucas's honor. Once the truth is exposed, he can no longer pretend that he doesn't know what's going on. He can't continue to act like an outsider when he's been pulled in deeper than ever before. Lucas knows that a big change is coming, and whether he wants it or not, he has to be the one to make the decision. If he doesn't, his life will never truly be his again. The explosion is close, and when it happens, Lucas will have no choice but to fight to reclaim his life. Lucas and Lucky are entering an unavoidable battle, a fight they must win if they want to regain control of their lives. It all started when Lucas realized that Marco was not just the charming man he once loved but also part of a dangerous criminal empire led by Sidwell. At first, Lucas thought he could stay out of everything, that his relationship with Marco could remain separate from Sidwell's world. But he was wrong. When Lucas uncovered evidence of Marco's illicit dealings, he knew he couldn't continue to turn a blind eye. The documents he found didn't just relate to Sidwell's operations. They also had traces of key figures in the criminal underworld. This meant Marco wasn't just a pawn in this game, he was an essential part of his father's plan. If Lucas didn't act quickly, Sidwell might use his power to control all of Port Charles. Realizing he couldn't confront Marco alone, Lucas turned to Lucky. This man had once been a victim of Sidwell, imprisoned, tortured by him. If anyone understood how Sidwell and his henchmen operated, it was Lucky. But what mattered more was that Lucky had a personal motive to help Lucas. After everything Sidwell had done to him, Lucky wanted to put an end to his reign once and for all. Lucas and Lucky immediately set to work on a plan. They knew they couldn't simply expose Marco to the public, he had too much influence, and Sidwell could easily cover things up. Instead, they needed to target his weaknesses, uncover undeniable proof, and force him to destroy himself. They tracked Marco's dealings, secretly gathered information on those he worked with, and slowly pieced together a conspiracy much larger than they had imagined. But things weren't easy. Marco began to realize that Lucas was investigating him. Their conversations became more tense, suspicious glances started to appear. Marco was no longer the charming, sweet man he had once been, he began to control, scrutinize Lucas, and most dangerously, he started trying to manipulate him. Lucas knew that Marco was trying to pull him back in, using the feelings they once had to soften him. But this time, Lucas couldn't allow himself to be deceived. Lucky warned Lucas that Marco wasn't someone easily defeated. He was smart, cunning, and most importantly, he had Sidwell backing him. If they wanted to take him down, they had to move quickly, before he had a chance to strike back. Lucas knew he couldn't hesitate. If he still felt any sympathy for Marco, if he let his emotions cloud his judgment, he could end up paying with his life. Things reached a boiling point when Lucas and Lucky discovered that Marco was planning a major deal, a transaction that could cement his position in Sidwell's organization. This was the opportunity they needed. If they could sabotage this plan, if they could expose Marco at the right time, he would have no way out. But time was not on their side. If they failed, Marco would know they had betrayed him, and they might be the next ones to disappear. As the fateful day approached, Lucas felt the weight of the pressure on his shoulders. He knew that once he crossed this line, there would be no going back. He was no longer an outsider in the battle between Sidwell and the other forces, he had officially become part of it. But he also knew he had no other choice. Lucas and Lucky went into the battle with everything they had. They knew that if they failed, they might never get another chance. But if they succeeded, they could take down one of the most dangerous forces Port Charles had ever seen. This was no longer just about taking down Marco, it was about regaining control, about protecting everything they loved from Sidwell's threat. This confrontation would not be easy. It would be a battle of wits, patience, and most importantly, courage. Lucas knew this would be the biggest challenge he had ever faced. But when he looked into Lucky's eyes, he knew they weren't alone. And that might just be all they needed to win. A storm is approaching, and when it erupts, no one can predict who will be the last one standing. But Lucas knows one thing for sure, he won't let Marco and Sidwell win. Not this time. Not ever.